I never thought I'd be the woman locked out of her own house. But there I was standing on the porch of the home I designed, the home I poured my soul into, while my husband, Daniel, stood in the doorway looking at me like "You can't do this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My fingers curled into fists, nails biting into my palms. "I can and I have," he said, his tone ice cold. "You need to leave, Isabella." My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. "This is my house, Daniel. I bought it before I even met you." Daniel smirked. "And you put my name on the deed, remember? Joint ownership. Legally, you have no right to be here anymore." My vision blurred for a second. My mind raced back to the day we signed those papers. He had convinced me it was for our future, for our security. I had trusted him. I had loved him. And now he was using it against me. "This is about the boutique, isn't it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You think you can take that from me too?" Daniel's smirk grew wider. "Oh, I don't think, Isabella. I know." The blood drained from my face. My boutique, my passion, my livelihood, was in a building I owned under my name alone. Or so I thought. "Check the paperwork," Daniel said casually. "You'll find that a little adjustment was made. A signature here, a transfer there. It's legally mine now." For the first time in my life I felt truly powerless. But as Daniel leaned in closer, his arrogance dripping from every word, something inside me snapped. I might have been blindsided, but I wasn't broken. Not yet. And he was about to find out exactly what kind of woman he had underestimated. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. Daniel wanted to see me break, to see me crumble like a weak, helpless woman. But I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I lifted my chin and squared my shoulders. "Fine," I said, my voice steady. "I'll leave." Daniel blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. Good. The sooner the better. I took a slow step back, my mind already spinning through every possibility. "I'll be back for my things," I added. Daniel crossed his arms, leaning against the doorframe like he had already won. "Take whatever you want, but don't drag this out, Isabella. There's nothing left for you here." That was the moment I realized something. Daniel wasn't just trying to take my house and my boutique, he was trying to erase me, to push me out of my own life as if I had never built any of it. I smiled at him, a slow, knowing smile. "We'll see about that." I turned on my heel and walked away, feeling his gaze burning into my back. I didn't look back, didn't let him see the storm of emotions brewing inside me. I had lost the battle. But the war? Oh, that was just beginning. I didn't go to a hotel. I didn't call a friend. I went straight to my lawyer. Michael Langston had been handling my legal affairs for years, ever since I first opened my boutique. He was sharp, meticulous, and most importantly loyal. The moment I stepped into his office, he took one look at my face and sighed. "Tell me everything." I sat down, clutching the armrests like they were the only thing keeping me upright. Daniel locked me out of the house. Michael's expression didn't change. "And the boutique?" I swallowed hard. "He says it's his now." Michael leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Did you sign anything recently?" I frowned, thinking back. "No, not for the boutique. But I remember Daniel bringing me papers a few months ago. He said it was for tax purposes, something about restructuring assets." My stomach twisted. I trusted him. Michael sighed. "We need to get those documents. If he tricked you into signing something, we might have a case for fraud." My pulse quickened. There was still hope. Michael stood. "In the meantime, don't engage with him. Act like you're retreating." Retreating? My pride bristled at the word. He gave me a small smirk. "A smart warrior never attacks without a strategy. Let him think he's won." I exhaled slowly, forcing down my frustration. "And then?" Michael's smirk widened. "Then we show him who he's really dealing with." For the next few days I did exactly what Michael advised. I disappeared. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't fight. I let him believe I had accepted defeat. Instead, I focused on gathering what I needed. First, I went to the boutique. Not through the front door where Daniel might have set traps for me, but through the back alley entrance only I knew about. I had owned that building long before he slithered into my life, and I knew every hidden corner. Inside, everything looked the same, but I could feel his presence all over it. My employees gave me cautious looks, their smiles tight with forced sympathy. Had he already poisoned them against me? I went straight to my office, my hands shaking as I powered up my computer. The boutique's financial records were still there. Good. I started copying everything onto a flash drive: bank statements, ownership documents, vendor contracts. If Daniel thought he could erase me, he was about to get a rude awakening. Then I found something I wasn't expecting. An email. From Daniel to an unknown buyer. Finalizing terms. She's out. Deal should be done by next month. My heart stopped. He wasn't just stealing my business, he was selling it. I gripped the edge of the desk, forcing myself to breathe. I had no time to waste. I ejected the flash drive, grabbed a few personal items from my desk, and slipped out the back before anyone could see me. Daniel thought he had one. He had no idea what was coming for him. The moment I stepped out of my boutique, I knew time was against me. If Daniel was already talking to buyers, I had days, maybe even hours before he closed the deal. And once that happened, getting my business back would be nearly impossible. I drove straight to Michael's office, barely giving his assistant a nod as I stormed in. He looked up from his desk, eyebrows raised. That bad? Worse. I tossed the flash drive onto his desk. He's selling the boutique. Michael cursed under his breath. He plugged in the flash drive and skimmed through the files as I paced the room. This is good, he murmured, his eyes scanning the documents. Very good. We have transaction histories, legal ownership records, even emails. If he altered ownership fraudulently, we can fight it. Can we stop the sale? I demanded. Michael tapped his fingers against his desk, thinking. Legally? We can try, but that could take weeks, maybe months, and buyers don't like complications. What we need is leverage, something that makes Daniel back off before this even reaches a courtroom. Leverage. I sank into the chair across from him, running a hand through my hair. He's careful, Michael. He covers his tracks. Michael smirked. No one is careful all the time. His words lit something in my mind. Daniel wasn't just trying to get rid of me, he was trying to erase every trace of me from my business, my home, my life. But that level of greed required boldness, and boldness led to mistakes. I thought back to our marriage, to the times he had brushed off my questions about finances, the secretive phone calls, the sudden business trips. There had to be something. Then I remembered the storage unit. 2 years ago, Daniel had insisted on renting a private storage unit, claiming he needed it for business records. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now it felt suspicious. I sat up. He has a storage unit. I don't know what's in it, but he's been paying for it for years. Michael's expression sharpened. If he's hiding anything, fraud, fake contracts, secret bank accounts, it could be there. A plan began to form. I'll get inside, I said. Michael frowned. Isabella, be careful. We can do this the legal way, subpoenas, investigations. We don't have time for legal, I interrupted. He's selling my boutique. If I wait, I lose everything. Michael hesitated, then sighed. Fine. But if you find anything, bring it straight to me. I nodded and stood. One more thing, I said. I need you to find out who the buyer is. If I can get to them first. Michael smirked. Now you're thinking like a businesswoman. The storage unit was in an industrial part of town, surrounded by rows of identical roll-up doors. I parked a block away and waited until the sun dipped below the horizon. Getting inside wasn't hard. Daniel had used his usual lack of imagination when setting the access code, our old anniversary date. I rolled up the door and flipped on the dim light inside. The unit was packed with boxes, filing cabinets, and what looked like old office furniture. At first glance, it was nothing special, but then I found the locked cabinet in the back. I knelt in front of it, my pulse pounding. A few sharp tugs told me the lock wasn't particularly strong. I grabbed a nearby crowbar, wedged it into the gap and pulled. The lock snapped. Inside were stacks of documents, financial statements, signed agreements, and at the very bottom, a thick folder labeled confidential. I pulled it out and flipped it open. And that's when I found it. Proof of offshore accounts. Transactions under fake business names. A trail of money Daniel had been siphoning for years. Money he had hidden from me, from his business partners, maybe even from the IRS. I let out a slow breath, barely able to contain the rush of satisfaction. I had him. By the time I left the storage unit, I had scanned everything onto my phone and made copies of the most incriminating documents. I drove straight to Michael's office, where he was waiting with an anxious expression. I dropped the folder onto his desk. "Merry Christmas." Michael flipped through the pages, his eyes widening with every passing second. "Oh, Daniel," he murmured. "You greedy idiot." I crossed my arms. "Can we use this?" Michael let out a short laugh. "This? Isabella, this is enough to bury him. This isn't just about the boutique anymore. He's looking at major fraud charges. If the right people see this, he won't be worrying about real estate. He'll be worrying about prison." A slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. "Then let's make sure the right people see it." Michael wasted no time. By morning, he had already sent anonymous copies of Daniel's offshore transactions to key agencies, his business associates, the IRS, even a few financial reporters. It was only a matter of time before the walls closed in on him. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to see Daniel's face when he realized he had lost. I arrived at the boutique just before noon, walking through the front doors like I still owned the place. Because in reality I did. The employees stiffened when they saw me. Some averted their eyes, while others hesitated as if unsure whether they should acknowledge me. Clearly, Daniel had been busy poisoning their minds. "Where's Daniel?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. Maggie, my assistant manager, who had been loyal to me for years, shifted nervously. "He's in your office." I gave her a small smile. "Correction, his office." She blinked at me in confusion, but I was already moving. I didn't knock. I walked in. Daniel was on the phone, his expression tight, his fingers gripping the receiver like a lifeline. The moment he saw me, he tensed. "I'll call you back," he muttered into the phone before hanging up. He exhaled sharply. "You shouldn't be here." I shut the door behind me. "Oh, I think I should." His jaw clenched. "If you came to beg, save your breath. The deal is already in motion." I smirked. "Oh, Daniel, you really think I'm here to beg?" His confidence wavered for a fraction of a second. "What are you playing at, Isabella?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the summary of his offshore accounts. I dropped it onto his desk and watched as he scanned the numbers. The color drained from his face. "You recognize those, don't you?" I said smoothly. "Offshore accounts. Tax fraud. Shell corporations. You didn't think I'd find them?" Daniel swallowed hard but forced out a scoff. "You think a few pieces of paper will scare me?" I tilted my head. "No, but the IRS will. So will the SEC. And let's not forget the buyers you're dealing with. How do you think they'll react when they realize they're negotiating with a man whose assets are about to be frozen?" His breath hitched. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I already did," I said sweetly. "By now, half the city knows what you've been up to. I'm guessing you've already gotten some interesting phone calls this morning." Daniel's eyes darted to his phone, and I knew I had hit my mark. I leaned forward, placing my hands on his desk. "Here's how this is going to go. You're going to sign over the boutique back to me. Immediately. In return, I might consider keeping some of this information from the more aggressive authorities." His nostrils flared. "You're blackmailing me." I shrugged. "No, I'm giving you options. Sign the business over to me, or get ready for orange jumpsuits and a shared prison cell. Your choice." Daniel sat back in his chair, his hands clenching into fists. He was cornered and we both knew it. Finally, he exhaled sharply, grabbing a pen. "You think this means you've won?" he hissed as he scribbled his signature on the transfer documents. "You're just as ruthless as I am." I smiled, taking the papers. "No, Daniel. The difference between us is that I built this empire. You just tried to steal it." I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving him to drown in the mess he had created. The boutique was mine again. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The moment I walked out of Daniel's office, I felt something shift inside me. The boutique was mine again, but there was still unfinished business. Daniel had tried to take everything from me. My home, my business, my future. And I wasn't about to let him walk away unscathed. I called Michael as I drove to my next destination. "It's done," I said the moment he picked up. "He signed the boutique over." Michael chuckled. "I knew he would." That little file of yours was enough to make even the boldest conman sweat. He's not bold, I muttered. He's desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. Michael hesitated. What are you planning? I want to hit him where it really hurts. Michael sighed. Isabella, you already won. The boutique is yours, and his financial mess will destroy him soon enough. Walk away while you're ahead. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had one last move to make. I pulled up to Daniel's office building. His real office, the one he had used for years while pretending to be a self-made businessman. I walked through the lobby with confidence, ignoring the confused looks from his staff. I knew exactly where I was going. Straight to his biggest investor. Mr. Richard Callaway was a powerhouse in the business world. A man who had funded Daniel's ventures, trusting him with millions of dollars. And now I was about to give him a reason to regret it. His secretary barely had time to stop me before I strode into his office. Mr. Callaway looked up, startled. Isabella? What are you? I dropped a folder onto his desk. Read it. He frowned but opened it, his eyes scanning the contents. As he turned each page, his expression darkened. These are. He looked up at me sharply. Offshore accounts? Fake transactions. I nodded. Your business partner has been moving money in ways that I doubt you'd approve of. Callaway's jaw clenched. This is fraud. I smiled. Yes. And if I were you, I'd reconsider any deals you have pending with him. Because soon, Daniel won't have a company to run. Callaway closed the folder and exhaled slowly. You realize this could ruin him. That's the idea. For a long moment he studied me, then leaned back in his chair. You have a spine, Isabella. I can see why he tried so hard to control you. I smirked. His first mistake was underestimating me. Callaway's fingers tapped against his desk. I'll handle this from here. By the time Daniel realizes what's happening, his investors will have pulled out, and his company will be in freefall. I nodded, satisfied. That's all I needed to hear. As I walked out of Callaway's office, I felt lighter than I had in months. Daniel had stolen from me, betrayed me, and tried to erase me. Now I had taken everything back. And soon he'd have nothing left. The fallout happened faster than even I expected. By the next morning, the business world was buzzing with whispers about Daniel's financial irregularities. Investors were pulling out, clients were backing away, and his so-called empire was crumbling beneath him. I watched it unfold like a silent storm, a destruction of his own making. And then he called me. I let the phone ring 3 times before answering. Hello, Daniel. You did this to me. His voice was raw with panic, stripped of the arrogance he usually carried. You ruined me, Isabella. I smiled to myself. No, Daniel. You ruined yourself. I just made sure everyone saw it. He let out a ragged breath. You think this is over? Oh, it is. My voice was calm, almost pitying. You stole from me, you lied, and you tried to erase everything I built. You should have been smarter. His breathing was heavy, frantic. I have nothing now. Not my problem. I hung up, feeling nothing but satisfaction. But I wasn't done yet. I drove back to my boutique, the one Daniel had tried to take from me, and walked inside like I owned the place. 'Cause now I did. Maggie, my assistant manager, rushed up to me. Isabella, we heard. I'm back, I said simply. For good. A slow smile spread across her face. Thank God. Employees who had once hesitated to meet my eyes were now beaming. Word must have spread fast. Daniel was out and I was reclaiming what was mine. I stepped into my office, exhaling deeply as I looked around. Everything was exactly as I had left it. Except for one thing. A letter sitting neatly on my desk. Frowning, I picked it up. Inside was a handwritten note, and as I read the words my heart stopped. You thought Daniel was your biggest problem. You were wrong. No signature. No explanation. Just a warning. A new storm was coming, and I had no idea who it was. My fingers tightened around the note. A chill crept up my spine, but I forced myself to stay calm. Daniel was done. His career, his finances, his influence, all gone. But this was something else. I turned the paper over, looking for any clue, any hint of who had sent it. Nothing. Just the unsettling message. I picked up my phone and called Michael. Isabella. He answered immediately. What's wrong? I got a note. My voice was steady but my pulse was racing. Someone's warning me. They said Daniel wasn't my biggest problem. There was a pause on the other end. Then Michael sighed. I was afraid of this. I stiffened. What do you mean? He hesitated before answering. Daniel wasn't smart enough to pull off everything he did alone. Offshore accounts, falsified ownership transfers. Someone was helping him. My grip on the note tightened. Who? I don't know yet, Michael admitted. But if they're sending you warnings, it means they're still in play. A sick realization settled in my stomach. Which means they're not done. Michael's tone turned serious. Be careful, Isabella. Whoever this is, they had a stake in Daniel's success. And now that you've burned it all to the ground, they may come after you next. I swallowed hard. Then I guess I need to find them first. Michael exhaled. What are you thinking? I stared at the note, my mind working quickly. Daniel wasn't my biggest problem. Whoever had helped him, funded him, guided him from the shadows, they were. And I was going to drag them into the light. I didn't wait for them to make the next move. If there was one thing I had learned from Daniel's downfall, it was that the person who struck first controlled the game. And I was about to end it. Michael and I spent the next 24 hours combing through Daniel's financial records again. This time looking for anything out of place. And then we found it. A name. Martin Caldwell. A powerful investor. Silent. Private. Dangerous. He had been quietly funding Daniel's schemes, moving money in and out of shell companies, covering up fraudulent transactions. He hadn't just been Daniel's safety net. He had been the mastermind behind it all. And now that Daniel was out of the picture, Caldwell saw me as the threat. I wasn't going to let him control my story. I was going to end his. The next morning, I walked into Caldwell's office unannounced. His secretary barely had time to react before I pushed the heavy oak doors open. Caldwell was an older man, impeccably dressed, sipping coffee like he didn't have a care in the world. He barely looked surprised to see me. Ah, he said smoothly. Isabella. I was wondering when you'd come. I shut the door behind me. You sent the note. He smiled, setting his coffee down. I warned you. You didn't listen. I walked toward his desk, keeping my voice calm. And now what? You threaten me? Try to scare me into silence. Caldwell chuckled. No, my dear. I don't threaten. I negotiate. I folded my arms. You helped Daniel steal from me. You manipulated him, funded him, and now that he's gone, you think you can step in and clean up the mess. He smirked. That's exactly what I do. I fix problems. I placed a thick folder on his desk. I'm not a problem you can fix. Caldwell's smirk faded as he opened the folder. His eyes flicked across the documents. Proof of his financial crimes, ties to Daniel's fraudulent businesses, evidence that could ruin him. His jaw tightened. Where did you get this? I smiled. You should be more careful about who you trust. Daniel wasn't as good at hiding things as he thought. Caldwell's fingers tapped against his desk. And what do you want, Isabella? Money. Power. I leaned forward, looking him dead in the eye. I want you out of my life. Out of my business. Out of everything. Silence stretched between us. Then Caldwell exhaled slowly. If I refuse, he asked. I reached for my phone. Then I pressed send, and this goes to every major financial investigator in the country. His lips pressed into a thin line. He knew he had lost. Finally, he gave a slow nod. Fine. You win. I stood, my heart pounding. I know. And with that, I walked out, leaving him to drown in his own mess, just like Daniel. By the end of the week, Caldwell had pulled out of every deal connected to my boutique. His investors turned on him, his reputation shattered. He was finished. And me? I stood in my boutique, in my office, finally free. I had lost my home, my trust, and nearly everything I built. But in the end I had won. And no one would ever take anything from me again. The end.